Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking a little bit about world building. I'm really excited for this topic because I am an obsessive world builder. I have my own world that I've been developing for a few years now, and it's gotten very complicated. It has multiple moons and a history spanning thousands of years, a whole calendar. It's intense. But it didn't get that way overnight, and it wasn't that way when I ran my first game in it. So today I want to talk a little bit about how I went from this to this. Of course, all of this is just my own personal process, and while some of these tips might apply for writing, this is really more so for D&D, because that's what I have the most experience world building for. Before I get started, I want to mention that my Patreon and my UPWORK are both live, so you should check those out. If you're looking for manuscript critiques, writing, graphic design, video editing, social media management, and more, check out my UPWORK. And if you want early access to my videos, or you'd like to request a video topic, check out my Patreon. The links are both down below. And if you want to play in a D&D game ran by me, head on over to startplaying.games, where you can join one of my sessions for as little as $15. That's about how much it would cost you to go to the movies, but instead you get a custom story made for you by me. I have a fairy tale inspired one-shot called The Enchanted Forest, which launches on September 27th. You can hire me for a custom game, or you can join my ongoing sandbox D&D game. My sandbox game is going to be set in my world, the same world that I'm going to be talking about throughout this video. So if you're interested in it, why don't you check that out? But anyway, this is probably going to end up being a very long video, so I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. So I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about the development of my world and how you can develop your own. The process basically starts out with taking a micro chunk of your world and expanding it out until you have this huge, complicated world. Because if you just start with the huge, complicated world, it's going to seem very daunting. So Section 1, starting out. At this stage, it's going to be really smart for you to make a world anvil. This is going to function similarly to a wiki for your world, with articles that you can link together, nestable maps, and a ton of other great features. I love World Anvil and could literally not function as a DM without it. And you could wait until your world is more established to make a World Anvil, but that's stupid. I've made that mistake a ton of times before, and I'm here to tell you don't do it. If you wait to create your World Anvil, you're going to have to go back and do all of the stuff that's already happened in your campaign. It is such a hassle, and it's so much easier if you just make these articles as you go from the moment that you conceive of your world. You can start building your world on World Anvil for free, but if you decide to check out one of their paid options, which I highly recommend, click on the affiliate link below. It's going to cost you no extra, but it helps to support the channel. Now, when you build your world, you're going to start with two things: a strong concept and a small area. It doesn't really do you much good to know about the far-off continent that your D&D players are never going to visit. So it can be helpful to start with a small area, a village, a town, a city, a kingdom, however big you decide to do it. Zoom in on the particular area that your players are going to be actually starting their game. This makes it way less daunting because you don't need the whole world, you just need this little chunk. And the other thing that you need, your concept, doesn't have to be anything complicated. When I started my world, I started with the concept, regular fantasy world. I was running a campaign for a few players after work who had never really played before, so I wanted to make it very typical and recognizable, so I created this map. And it has things on it like the Elvish Woods, the Dwarvish Mountains, and the Halfling Hills, just to make things seem very simple for them. But if you want to do something more high concept than a typical fantasy world, this is the time to think about that. Do you want to create a grimdark dystopia or a goofy fairy tale world? What does your world feel like, and what's it like to be a part of it? Now is the time to decide, and that decision is going to bleed through to all of the other parts of your world. This smaller area might be all you need. I ran almost an entire campaign in this area before I needed to expand it out. And even then, I only expanded it out because I wanted to. The players started in Lorraine, they ended up in Pondhaven, the capital city of Eastvale, and then they ended the first kind of stretch of their campaign in Mistshire. All of those locations are on this map. But then I ran into a roadblock, which is just that I wanted another town to exist, and I didn't have it on this map. So that was when I expanded my map out to continent level. Which brings us to Section 2, which is continent level. When you're ready to expand out to continent level, I recommend going to this website. I'm showing all of these on the screen, but they're going to be in the description as well. What this website is going to do is generate the shape of your continent, and it'll come up with something way more realistic than whatever you would have come up with trying to draw it by hand. I think I only use this for the shape of my world's continents, but it also generates a name and some other useful information like the size and climate. And during the first step, when you're choosing your area, you could just start by doing this. You can either use it to create a smaller island, or you can just zoom in onto whichever corner of it you need as your smaller area. And now it's time for us to talk about Incarnate. By the way, Incarnate is not sponsored or anything. I would love it if they would sponsor me, but they're not. They're just the map maker I use. Once you have your map generated, you can import it as a custom stamp on Incarnate. Then turn the transparency down and trace it using the brush tool. When I did my original map, I already had a smaller section of my map that I was expanding outwards. So then what I did is I also imported that as a custom stamp and added it onto the area that I wanted. Then when I traced the land, I just included the stuff that I already had. At this point, you might want to make a world map, something like this. You don't need to know what's in these continents, but now is when you can start to reference far-off continents that your players aren't going to go to. It might not be useful for you to know what's there, but it's nice to give your players the sense that there is something out there. In my games, I'm constantly referencing the far-off continent of Omnios. It's the hugest continent in my world, and honestly, I have no fucking clue what's there. Doing this just really helps to make your world feel very vast and unexplored. And from this point on, you just continue with the idea of zooming in on smaller parts of your world and completing them one at a time until the whole thing is done. You don't need to know what you need to know until you need to know it, I guess? Is that a sentence? And finally we come to section 3, the cosmology. Your world is done now, or it's at least as done as you need it to be. But you're an idealist. You want to look toward the stars. Or maybe you're doing something sci-fi, or maybe your players got a spelljammer. There's a lot of reasons that you might want to look to space. When you start to look beyond your world, the first thing you're going to want to consider is moons. And that's because when you're on your world, the players look up at the night sky, what do they see? Is there one moon? Is there multiple moons? Are there any moons at all? My world has 3 moons. I have another tool for you that's going to be really invaluable, especially if you have more than one moon. If you go to this website, you can create a calendar of your world. And this is going to be super helpful because if you have more than one moon, you can go in and set the actual cycles of each moon, and it'll give you the phases that each moon is on any particular day. You can also set holidays. I use this sometimes to track where players are and on what day they did things. This might also be the time that you want to consider giving your world its own custom days of the week and months. And you could, but honestly, in my experience as a DM, your players are not going to learn that. And when you say one of these fantasy days of the week or months, a lot of the time it doesn't register as having any meaning. If I say January or Wednesday, the players know very specifically from their life what that means. And so I have equivalents in my world, but I really don't use them because I know the players aren't going to learn. Now if you're crazy, like I am, one world is never enough. You need a solar system. And actually, this might be a good chance to explore the religions of your world. In our world, the planets are obviously named after the Roman gods. In your world, are they also named after gods? Are they named after rulers instead? It's up to you. And if the planets in your solar system are named after gods, who are those gods? At some point I want to do a video addressing fantasy pantheons and how to create your own, but that's not this video. This is my world solar system, and I made this image using this website. It's just like a little game where you can create a solar system, but I found it very helpful. I just kind of put in all the planets, and then I took a screenshot. And again, if you're bonkers, you might want something more zoomed in than this. You might want an actual image of each planet that's a little more complicated than the little circles on this. In that case, go to this website across your screen, and you can make your own planet. You can very easily change a few parameters and make a pretty cool and unique looking planet. You can even customize the different moons, the angle of the sun. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here. Here's a quick slideshow of some of the worlds in my solar system that I made using this website. And that's it. If you followed every step here, you probably have a pretty in-depth D&D world. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you just did section 1 and stopped there because that was all you needed. And that's fine. Not every game is the kind of game that requires this whole cosmology in a very complex world. Sometimes just a little bit is enough. It's really up to what kind of DM you are and what kind of players you have. World building is obviously a huge topic, and I'm going to continue to make videos like this. Probably at some point I would like to address religions and politics and all of the different things that actually make up these kind of zoomed in elements of your world. I guess this video is more tools for map making and things like that. So that's all I've got for you today. If you like this video, like, subscribe, comment, do all those things. that make YouTube think that you want to see my content. Anyways, see ya.